The fuse hissed, spitting sparks like angry fireflies, burning down to its last agonizing inch. Before it, tied fast to sun-bleached cottonwood, the Miller family waited for death. John, Martha, young Sarah clinging tight, teenage Ben staring wide-eyed helpless. A crude bundle of dynamite lay at the tree's base, placed there by men whose greed knew no bounds. An explosion meant to silence them forever, to wipe their struggling homestead off the map. They were left under the merciless Arizona sun, abandoned to a fiery end, their fate sealed, or so it seemed. Because out in the shimmering heat haze, unseen, unheard, a Navajo warrior watched, and destiny was about to take an unexpected turn. John Miller hadn't sought this life for the danger. He'd seen enough killing, enough hardness in years he rarely spoke of, years he tried to bury under the honest labor of turning soil and raising walls. He'd brought Martha and the children here, near the towering sandstone canyons the Navajo called home, chasing a quieter existence, a patch of earth, peace. That was the dream. But peace on the frontier was a fragile thing. Their life was etched in sweat, marked by the constant struggle against drought and isolation. Their small cabin, built by John's own hands, was sturdy, but vulnerability clung to it like the dust that settled on everything. Martha, her face a map of quiet strength and unspoken fears, tended her meager garden and prayed for rain and for safety. Ben worked beside his father, growing into the land, his youthful energy a thin shield against the unease that lingered at the edges of their world. Sarah, too young to understand the source of the tension, felt it nonetheless, her laughter sometimes quieting without warning. John knew they weren't truly alone. He respected the unseen boundaries of the Navajo, had glimpsed their riders moving like ghosts through the canyons. He'd warned Ben away from sacred grounds, recognizing signs others missed. It wasn't hostility, just distance, a silent acknowledgement of separate worlds. Sometimes, watching those distant figures, John felt a pang of something buried deep within himself, a discipline, an awareness, but he pushed it down. His focus was here, this land, this family, this desperate hope for tranquility. He just hadn't realized how thin the walls of that tranquility were, how easily they could be shattered. The shattering began one blistering afternoon. Bart Corbin rode up, flanked by two men whose faces looked carved from granite. Dust billowed around them, settling like a shroud. Corbin owned the sprawling ranch to the north, a man whose appetite for land was insatiable. He was thick-set, his fancy shirt dark with sweat, his eyes small and sharp, missing nothing, valuing little beyond ownership. He scanned the Miller homestead, the small cabin, the struggling corn patch, with open disdain. He addressed John, his voice rough gravel. "Miller, heard you were digging in here." John stepped forward, wiping sweat from his brow. Martha watched from the cabin door, her hand gripping the frame, so tightly her knuckles were white. Ben stood near his father, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. "We are, Mr. Corbin." Making a go of it, Corbin spat tobacco juice, the brown stream landing close to John's worn boot. "This land ain't much," he drawled. "Dry, rocky, hardly worth the sweat." He paused, letting the words hang heavy. "Tell you what, feeling generous today. I'll take it off your hands. Fair price, enough to move you somewhere easier." John's jaw tightened. He knew Corbin wasn't being generous. Rumors said this patch held a hidden spring, water more valuable than gold in this arid territory. Corbin wanted control of it. "Appreciate the offer, Mr. Corbin, but we ain't selling. This is our home now." A cold smile touched Corbin's lips, but never reached his eyes. "Think carefully, Miller. This country, it has ways of discouraging folks who don't fit in." His men shifted, their hands drifting near their holsters. The air grew thick with unspoken menace. "We know our place," John replied, his voice quiet but firm, betraying none of the cold dread coiling in his gut. "And we aim to stay right here." Corbin chuckled, a humorless sound. "Suit yourself." He yanked his horse's reins, turning sharply. "But don't come crying when things get uncomfortable." They rode away, leaving a silence that felt louder than their threats. Martha rushed to John's side. "John, those men, their eyes." He pulled her close, trying to project calm. "Just a bully, Martha. All bluff and bluster." But as he watched the riders shrink into the distance, he knew it wasn't bluff. The fragile peace was gone. The storm was gathering. The harassment started subtly, like a slow poison. A section of fence wire, painstakingly repaired just days before, found cut clean through. Tools left near the barn simply vanished. Then, one morning, the heart-sinking discovery of trampled corn stalks, a deliberate path crushed through their vital crop. Not random vandalism, targeted pressure. The final, ugly message came days later. The severed head of a rattlesnake left squarely on their doorstep. A crude, unmistakable warning. John knew who was behind it. Corbin was tightening the screws, expecting him to break, to run. The quiet farmer John tried to be felt increasingly like a poorly fitting costume. The instincts he'd worked so hard to suppress began to stir. He found himself scanning the landscape differently, noting shadows, analyzing tracks near the damaged fence with an old, unwelcome familiarity. He spent evenings reinforcing the cabin, checking the action on his dusty Colt revolver, the weight of it both a burden and a grim reassurance. He and Ben started keeping watch at night, the silence punctuated by the yip of coyotes and the creaks of the cooling earth, every sound magnified, scrutinized. Martha's fear became a constant presence, her movements tense, her eyes darting towards the horizon at the slightest noise. Sarah drew pictures of dark riders with menacing faces. Ben tried to shoulder the burden, acting older, tougher, but John saw the strain. He felt trapped, the isolation pressing in. He occasionally saw smoke signals, far off on the mesas. Navajo signs. Were they aware of the settlers' troubles? Did they care? It felt like another world, distant and unknowable, while his own was shrinking, closing in. The small acts of defiance, the quiet preparations, he sensed they wouldn't be enough. Corbin wasn't a man to be deterred by resilience. He was a man who took what he wanted, one way or another. John felt a cold certainty settle over him. Corbin would escalate. He just didn't know how soon, or how brutally. Bart Corbin's impatience festered. The Millers weren't breaking, they were enduring. This stubbornness, this refusal to be intimidated, infuriated him. He wanted their land, the water he was convinced lay beneath it, and he'd wasted enough time on warnings. Elimination seemed simpler, cleaner. No witnesses, no lingering claims. He gathered his most brutal hands, men loyal to his coin, not conscience, and laid his plan. They knew the Millers checked their southern boundary marker regularly. They would wait there, hidden among the rocks. The ambush was brutally efficient. John and Ben walked slightly ahead, scanning the terrain, while Martha and Sarah followed. Suddenly, Corbin's men erupted from behind boulders and dense scrub. John reacted on pure instinct, shoving Martha and Sarah back, his hand reaching for the Colt. But they were exposed, outnumbered. A rifle but slammed against his temple, sending stars exploding behind his eyes. He staggered, fighting to stay conscious. Ben launched himself at an attacker with desperate fury, landing a solid blow before being overwhelmed by two more men. Rough hands grabbed Martha and Sarah, stifling their screams. It was over in moments. John, head pounding, vision swimming, found himself bound hand and foot. Ben lay nearby, breathing hard, a trickle of blood coming from his lip. Martha and Sarah were tied securely, Martha trying vainly to soothe her terrified, weeping daughter. Corbin emerged from the rocks, a look of cruel satisfaction spreading across his thick features. "Told you, Miller," he sneered, kicking dust near John's face. "Should have listened. Should have taken the offer." His men hauled the family away from the trail, deeper into the harsh landscape, towards a natural depression shielded by weathered rock formations. A secluded spot, perfect for ensuring privacy. They stopped before a large, gnarled cottonwood, its bark bleached, white by years of sun. "Tie him up good and tight," Corbin ordered, his voice ringing with authority. rope bit into wrists and ankles as they were secured against the rough bark, facing outwards, exposed. Corbin retrieved the dynamite sticks from a saddlebag, handling the deadly cargo with unnerving casualness. He knelt, placing the bundle directly in front of them, near the base of the tree. He produced a length of fuse, measured it with slow deliberation, cut it, and carefully inserted one end into the dynamite. "A real shame, Miller," Corbin said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "Just a terrible accident waiting to happen. Dynamite, nasty stuff. Unpredictable. Wipes out a whole family sometimes." He struck a match. The flame flared brightly against the afternoon glare. He touched it to the fuse. It caught immediately, smoke curling, the telltale hissing sound starting its deadly countdown. Corbin and his men stepped back, forming a semicircle, ready to watch their problem disappear. John strained against the ropes, a guttural sound of rage and despair tearing from his throat. Martha squeezed her eyes shut, her lips moving in silent prayer. Ben stared, transfixed by the burning fuse, horror paralyzing him. Sarah buried her face in her mother's side, sobbing uncontrollably. The flame ate steadily along the fuse, closer, sparks marking the final seconds of the Miller family's existence. Time seemed to warp, each hiss of the fuse echoing like thunder in the sudden, awful stillness. The flame crept relentlessly towards the dynamite bundle. John Miller shut his eyes, a lifetime of hopes turning to ash, bracing for the thunderous roar, the obliteration. Martha clutched Sarah, her own body a rigid shield of terror. Ben gritted his teeth, impotent fury a bitter taste in his mouth. Inches remained a fraction of a second between life and violent death, and then to flicker, a disturbance in the oppressive heat waves rising from the rocks. High above them, on the rim of the natural amphitheater, a silhouette detached itself from the sandstone background. It moved down the steep incline, not with the scramble of a settler, but with the impossible fluidity of water flowing over stone. Silent, swift, Hasteen, a Navajo warrior, his face set like carved wood, his eyes taking in the entire scene with piercing intensity. He carried a hunting bow, a quiver bristling with arrows at his back. This was no chance encounter. Hasteen had observed Corbin's men before, from hidden vantage points. He'd noted their arrogance, their clumsy intrusions, their disregard for the land and its unspoken rules. He recognized Corbin's type, men whose hunger consumed everything, upsetting the delicate balance of the desert world. His intervention wasn't born of allegiance to these specific settlers, but from a deeper principle. The sight of a family bound and helpless, facing execution by cowardly means on land as people understood intimately. It was a profound dishonor, a violation that demanded correction. His appearance wasn't rescue in the white man's sense. It was the swift, decisive restoration of order. He melted into the shadows near the base of the rocks, downwind, unseen, unheard, waiting for the precise instant to act. That instant arrived just as the fuse spat its final sparks before the dynamite. The intervention wasn't announced by a yell, but by the sharp, resonant thwack of an arrow slamming into the cottonwood trunk, its shaft vibrating inches from Bart Corbin's stunned face. Corbin leaped back, cursing, his smugness instantly replaced by alarm. What in blazes? His men whirled, fumbling for their guns, eyes scanning the surrounding rocks wildly. "Who's out there?" One shouted, his voice cracking with sudden fear. "Show yourself." Only silence answered, then the whisper of another arrow slicing through the air. It struck the rifleman's weapon, tearing it from his grasp and sending it spinning onto the dusty ground. Panic erupted. Corbin's men started firing blindly towards the canyon walls, slugs whining off the rocks, their shots wasted against an enemy they couldn't see. Hasteen flowed through their chaos. He used their confusion, their noise, their predictable movements against them. An arrow struck a shoulder, eliciting a sharp cry of pain and dropping another man. A third arrow pinned a gunman's, shooting hand to the earth, the shaft pinning fabric and flesh to the dirt. Hasteen wasn't interested in killing unless necessary. His aim was incapacitation, swift and sure. He moved with the land, not separate from it. Each rock, each patch of shade an ally. Corbin, red-faced with rage and growing panic, finally drew his own pistol. He fired wildly at a shadow he thought he saw near a jumble of boulders. The shots echoed, finding nothing. In that instant, Hasteen burst from cover from an entirely different direction, covering the ground with blinding speed. He didn't notch another arrow. A hard, swift strike with the thick wood of his bow knocked Corbin's pistol flying. Before the stunned rancher could react, Hasteen was on him, a knife blade pressed firmly against the pulse point in Corbin's thick neck. The fight, if it could be called that, was over. The last standing thug, witnessing his boss's instant defeat, dropped his gun and threw his hands high in surrender. The entire confrontation had unfolded in less than a minute, a whirlwind of disciplined violence against panicked aggression. Hasteen radiated lethal competence, yet his actions were measured, controlled. He seemed to view Corbin with contempt rather than hatred. Using Corbin's own rope, he efficiently bound the rancher, leaving him sputtering impotently on the ground beside his injured man. Only then did Hasteen turn his attention fully to the millers. He moved to the dynamite bundle. The severed fuse lay still, its thread extinguished. With the same calm precision, he used his knife to cut the ropes binding John, then Martha, Ben, and finally, gently Sarah. He offered no words. His dark eyes met John's for a long moment. In that silent exchange, something passed between them. Profound gratitude offered, stoic acknowledgement received. Worlds collided and understood each other without a sound. Hasteen collected his arrows methodically from the ground, the tree, the wounded men. He cast one last, unreadable glance at the trussed-up Corbin, then turned towards the rocks. As silently and mysteriously as he had appeared, he began to ascend, blending seamlessly into the patterns of stone and shadow. Within moments, he was gone, leaving behind the stunned silence, the bound villains, and a family miraculously snatched from the brink. The millers stood together, clinging to each other, the enormity of their ordeal washing over them. The dynamite bundle lay inert, a terrifying monument to what almost was. Corbin cursed and struggled against his bonds, his power broken, his humiliation complete. Slowly, painfully, John helped his family to their feet. They began the long walk back to their small cabin, each step heavy with exhaustion and relief. The homestead, which had felt so fragile before, now seemed like a beacon, a testament to their survival. Word eventually spread through the sparse settlements, carried perhaps by Corbin's scattered men, eager to distance themselves from his failure and cruelty. Corbin's reputation, built on bluster and brutality, lay in ruins. Few tears were shed for his downfall. The story of the miller's impossible rescue grew into hushed legend, talk of a phantom Navajo warrior who appeared when injustice went too far. The millers endured. They rebuilt what was broken, patched their fences, nurtured their corn. The fear never vanished completely, but it was overlaid now with something else: resilience, gratitude, and a deep, abiding respect for the vast, mysterious land and its silent watchers. John often found his gaze drawn to the distant mesas. He never saw Hasteen up close again, but sometimes, in the clear desert light, he thought he could discern a lone figure on horseback, observing from afar. Not a threat, but a presence, a reminder. Their patch of earth, hard-won and nearly lost, felt different now, protected by more than just their own hands. The West remained wild, unforgiving, but they knew now that even in the deepest despair, help could arrive like the hawk on the wind, fate altered by a single act of unexpected courage from the heart of the canyons. They lived on, forever changed by the echo of an explosion that never came, and the silent warrior who had turned back death itself.